Good evening and welcome back to TVP World. These are World Talks. My name is Alex Simlinski. Now, EU leaders have rallied behind Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk's statement to temporarily ban asylum for those coming from Russia or Belarus, warning Moscow not to weaponize migrant flows to destabilize European countries. Last week, the Polish Prime Minister announced that Poland would temporarily suspend asylum rights for migrants headed to his country via its border with Belarus. Thousands of people have been trying to cross Poland's heavily forested border with Belarus for the past 3 years. They have been encouraged to fly to Minsk by Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko and are then directed by Belarusian authorities toward the border with Poland. And joining us now to discuss this topic further is Jowanka Jakubek-Lalik, Associate Professor, University of Warsaw. Good evening and welcome to TVP World.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
So now, the Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen praised the recent discussions among leaders of the EU as being, and I quote, finally more realistic and honest when it comes to migrants and asylum seekers. So did the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk really change the approach to the EU migration debate, or did he just start saying what other European leaders are thinking?
Well, first of all, Polish Prime Minister, I think, was able to explain and to demonstrate what kind of problems Poland is facing with the protection of the external borders of the European Union, yes, because this is not only a Polish border, but it's an external EU border. So the border with Belarus and also with Russia are the problematic places because the migrants coming from different countries are used as weapons, as instruments actually to use as in this kind of hybrid warfare techniques. So I think that what happened in Brussels demonstrates that there is a common position among EU member state leaders when it comes to migration topics, because what Prime Minister of Poland was saying actually gained a lot of support from other European Union leaders. Therefore, this position seems to be coming to the same place, yes.
Mm-hmm. So now, what is the Polish Prime Minister's plan on migration, and just how will this right to political asylum look like now? Do we know?
Well, first of all, we still don't have any changes to the laws. What happened recently were the introduction of the strategy, which was discussed and adopted by the Polish Council of Ministers, so Polish government, which means that indeed this kind of temporarily right to actually suspend this right to claim for asylum might be introduced in some situations on the border with Belarus. However, again, it's a strategy, it's not a law, and we still do not have any details when it comes to how this right to suspend asylum seekers could work in practice. So we still need to wait in order to find out how this topic will be approached by the legislation. So currently the biggest aspect of the situation is that the whole European Union is looking for solutions how to address the problem of migration. And there seems to be a consensus among all of the European Union member states that these kind of solutions need to be very effective and they need to be adopted very soon in order to address this challenge. And also some other European Union member states already provided some other solutions, like, for example, Italy, who signed an agreement with Albania to try to, let's say, redress the migrants coming to Italy to Albanian centers. So there are different topics on the table, and currently the role of the European Union is try to look for the solutions that would be acceptable and also from the legal perspective, from the perspective of the human rights.
Mm-hmm. So now, based on what you just said, I want to ask, because Ursula Wonderlands, the EU Commission President, she is advocating for a unified EU approach for these migrant returns, suggesting the creation of specialized return hubs outside EU borders. So how do the reception centers that you mentioned for migrants in Albania, which was, of course, the idea of the Italian government, How does this play into Ursula von der Leyen's idea?
Well, I think there are two different topics here. First topic is those centers which are constructed based on the agreement between Italy and Albania, but those centers were supposed to play a role in having the migrants who are trying to reach the Italian border. So those who were still not processed in terms of claiming the right to asylum. And here we have a recent judgment by the Italian court only from yesterday that actually deemed this pact not legal because I think it was 18 migrants who were subject of this claim to the court, and they actually won the case in the court against the Italian government. So this solution seems, even in legal terms, quite problematic. However, what European Union Commission President is proposing is another issue. So this is a topic of the centers where the migrants who were refused the right to stay in the European Union could wait for being actually expelled from the European Union, we can say. So those people who are waiting to actually go back to their home countries, they could potentially, that is the proposal, wait outside of the European Union. To what extent this solution will be put to practice, we will see. For the time being, I think that also some of the concerns which are raised by, for example, Germany, where some of the migrants who were actually waiting to come back to their home countries because their asylum rights were not, actually they did not have the right to stay in Germany, but because still the procedure was not finalized, they actually committed some crimes. So that was also one of the reasons that the European Union institutions and also member states are looking for some other solutions.
Mm-hmm. So now you mentioned the concerns that appeared in Germany. Are there any other concerns that European countries will have to deal with, and just how unified do you think the EU is in its approach to these migrant returns?
Well, what we can see from the last summit in Brussels, the European Union countries are very much unified when it comes to this very much toughened approach to migration. From all of the European Union member states, there seems to be a consensus that the migration needs to be limited and also it needs to be controlled. The people who are coming to the EU indeed require the assistance in terms of their position and their rights. And also the Polish perspective, which means that Poland is under threat of the hybrid warfare attacks from the side of the Belarus, also mean that this kind of solutions that would be effective in protecting the border. However, again, we need to balance it with the approach and taking into consideration human rights and international law obligations. So this is indeed a very difficult topic to be addressed. So European Union leaders need to really carefully approach this topic in order to find the solutions that would really be effective.
Mm-hmm. And based on what you said now, I also wanted to go back to Ursula von der Leyen, who recently wrote that the EU's migration policy can only be sustainable if those who do not have the right to stay in the EU are effectively returned. Mm-hmm. So now, what exactly does effectively mean, right? And based on what we also heard in the news, that Italy has a list of countries that are deemed to be safe, and presumably these people, like we also heard in the news, men would be turned back there. So how, what is effectively, and how will now, countries decide on who has this right to asylum and who doesn't?
Well, I think what Ursula von der Leyen was addressing is also one of the examples from Germany when the procedure of granting the asylum was finalized as negative, but still those people stayed on the territory of Germany and they were not sent away to their home countries, and they committed some crimes. which means that effectively means that when the procedure is over, when there is no way for this person to appeal, they should be effectively removed from the territory of the European Union and sent back to the country, which is again on the list of the safe countries. And here I think we will have another discussion and dilemma, which countries are indeed safe. Because even Italian government is currently proposing that countries like Syria or Afghanistan can be actually considered safe countries. So this is, I think, very controversial approach. But even countries like Egypt or Bangladesh, which again, they are on this list of safe countries. People can face prosecution in those countries. They can have also problems with respecting of their basic rights. They can be politically prosecuted, which means that they should be able to claim asylum in European Union. So again, how to approach this topic, how to solve it is going to be a big challenge.
And this brings me to my last question briefly. I know you have touched upon this, mentioning, of course, international law and human rights. So now, how does the EU deal with these hybrid attacks from Belarus and Russia without compromising EU values?
That's a very big question, and I think that the common action of all EU member states is really needed. And all of the countries, all of the leaders and all of the societies need to really have a huge discussion how to do it, because we are facing, let's say, the conflict of two values. Yes, on one hand, we need to provide security for the citizens, and secure borders are #1 priority. But on the other hand, we have human rights, and we have people who really are desperate in their situations, and they should have the right to claim asylum. So how to balance those two values? This is indeed going to be a huge challenge.
So do you think it's more discussions, maybe more summits, or how to have these discussions?
Well, first of all, the EU strategy for migration, it was not a very successful document, not a very successful proposal, because the majority of the member states actually criticized this approach and proposed much stricter measures that were envisaged in that document. It was only, let's say, perceived as the opening up of the discussion. So currently what needs to happen is to agree on some measures. And I think that what is really very important here is to find a common position that all of the member states could agree and could really be very consequent about implementing, because that is the only way that this kind of measures could work. But again, there are no easy solutions here, and this topic needs to be approached from a very different perspective, from the security of the borders to also planning how to integrate the people who are coming to the EU to the European societies. So it needs to be a very complex and comprehensive approach to really address the topic.
All right, and with that message, we'll end it there. Jowanka Jakubek-Lalik, Associate Professor from the University of Warsaw, was our guest here today for these World Talks. Thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you very much.
And with that, we wrap up these World Talks. But for more interviews like this and news updates, make sure to stay tuned to TVP World. Thanks for watching.